Hi, my name is Donna Lawrence, and I'm the author of Miss Virginia and the Sweet Sisters. I am so honored to be asked by the Boulder Bookstore to do this Q&A with you so that you know a little bit about my book, about me, and why I wrote this fabulous book. So stay tuned, and here we go. Miss Virginia and the Sweet Sisters is a coming of age, suspenseful murder mystery. It's set in the heart of Kentucky bluegrass country in 1967. It's the story of a mixed race girl who grows up trying to fit in with her circle of black friends. She finds it difficult to do, and in trying to navigate how to fit in, a murderer comes back to the town who committed a murder a long time ago. So Lindsay finds herself in the unique position of trying to not only find a way to fit in with her group of friends, but also how to protect them from the murderer who comes to town. I was inspired to write this book for many reasons. One of the most important reasons has to do with race relations and how we interact with each other today. I wanted to take a step back and look at where we were during the 1960s. It was a turbulent time for our nation, having to do with civil rights and acceptance and tolerance. So I wanted to somehow examine how far we've come since those days. I wanted to celebrate the triumphs. I wanted to talk about the failures and how we came together as a nation, how we interact with each other, and we've made so many strides, and I think we kind of forget that. So to harken back to those days certainly gives us a barometer on who we are as people today. This book is a little different, I think, than other books written about race. I Let me say it this way. I was intrigued by the idea of a young girl of 13 growing up in 1967 who is of mixed race and how she navigates the idea of colorism within the Black community. Um, it's something that has been talked about, but I don't know that it's been talked about through this particular lens. I wanted to give the reader an idea of what life might be like for someone who is treated other than within her own community, how she grows up, how she navigates those waters, how she grows as an individual. And along with the challenges that come with that, we interject this other element of evil that she has to deal with. Um, this particular book talks about all the different kinds of manifestations of the evil that lives within the soul of man and also the goodness. How a young girl transcends that and how she grows as an individual, I think was something that was very powerful to explore. How she manages to overcome so much in this book, I think, is a story that all of us can relate to, especially from a child's perspective. This next question is kind of interesting. Let me see if I can answer it as best I can. When I write, I am as surprised as anyone to to find out what the character goes through. When it comes to the suspenseful element within developing story, I can't say that it's something that I plan or plot out. Sometimes it just happens by accident, just in the mechanics of writing. I find myself in situations where I'm going along for the ride as an author. There are moments, for instance, if I'm right in the middle of writing something and all of a sudden a scream is heard in the room, in the woods. Um, who's screaming? Why are they screaming? What causes this to happen? So for me, it's as much of a surprise as it is for the character who's experiencing this. And it prompts you to go further into finding out what these things are about. So as far as suspense is concerned, I think it's something that just kind of occurs spontaneously. Certainly there is an element of an anticipation of something about to happen, but how that happens, why that happens, and the journey the characters take to discover this and to figure this out is something that I think is fun, and certainly for an author, it certainly is exhilarating to find out just what this thing is all about, and let's go in and dig a little deeper and find out what's happening. Wow, that's an interesting question. What kind of writer? What is my writing process? Um, Miss Virginia and the Sweet Sisters is my debut novel. It's my very first. I do have another novel that I'm working on, and hopefully I'll get that done and published next year. In the meantime, I've written a novella with a series of short stories. So I hope to get those published before the end of the year. So, yay! Um, but if I had to describe my writing process, I'd have to say I'm probably a pantser. I'm not one to plot or outline anything in my stories. That's just not how I do. I find that it's a lot more fun to understand the what if scenario. So I do take a premise and I have a conclusion. So you have to know where your story starts and where it's going to end. Filling in the middle, that's where imagination lives, and that's where the fun starts. Um, so outside of that, if I had to say that I do anything as far as plotting is concerned, writing anything that is of historical value, I think it's important to have the chronology of events right. So I will outline the timeline of events. And so that's the plotting mechanism that I use when I write. But other than that, I'm pretty much a pantser, taking the what if and just going with it and understand where I'm going to end up. Filling in the middle is where the fun lies. A couple of books that I've recently read. Just want to tell you about those. One is this book by Charlie Mackesy. It's called The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. I really love this book. It has a lot of interesting drawings and illustrations, and it is full of these wonderful witticisms that I think we can all live by. So, this is something that I highly recommend. Love this book. Another book that I am rereading is this one by Robert Harris called Pompeii, and it's well written. I really love this book. It's not at all like the movie that was done about Pompeii, although that was a fabulous movie. Don't get me wrong, but this one is just absolutely fabulous. It's full of history. I'm a history buff, and it has wonderful characters. It has all of the elements of suspense and thrill of the fall of Pompeii. It even has historical figures like Pliny the Elder, and his nephew, I think he's called, yeah, Pliny the Younger. And it's just a great read, along with my book. These are the two books that I'm recently read that I highly recommend. There is so much more that I can say about my book, Miss Virginia and the Sweet Sisters. Even though I've talked about it being coming of age, it is a suspenseful murder mystery, but it's so much more than that. My book is full of different characters, very colorful characters, um, good people, bad people. It even touches on the seedy side of growing up in a small town. We have various heroes, not only the main character, but others. It's just full of so much. But the main thing I want to touch on, as far as what my book is about, there's an unanswered question in this book. And that question is, who are we as a people in how we treat each other? In the Black community, I wanted to touch on the discrimination element and acceptance. Who are we as a people if we can't look at ourselves through a mirror that reflects back on us? That says, how are we to talk about discrimination when we discriminate against our own? How can we go out in the world and talk about this and ask to be um, more, ask that there is more in the way of acceptance and tolerance if we don't do it ourselves? Not only for the Black community, but in other racial communities around the world. I hope that that's the message that comes out of this book. And I hope that in its raw and authentic way, I have brought these characters to life with the manner of the way they speak to each other back in 1967, in the way that other cultures are bought into this book. There's so much here that I think a lot of people will certainly read and enjoy. And I just hope that at the end of this book, they'll come to realize that we're not so much different from each other. We're really the same. We have the same values, we have the same love for each other, and we need to try and make that happen across racial barriers. Now I'm going to read an excerpt from my book, and this is taken from chapter 5, titled The Strange Boogeyman. After Angie said her goodbyes, I walked with Doreen to where Grandma met us at her front door. In a cheerful voice, she waved hello and then called for me to be careful going home. When the door shut, I was alone. Doreen often said I didn't need anyone to walk me home at night because I had a built-in night light shining through my almost white skin. I didn't mind too much because I enjoyed the quiet and listened to the distant voices of those safely on their way home. Because of the new moon, the night was darker than usual, and the cool night air was nice to feel for change. Further away than I cared to think about, our house seemed even more so on that moonless night. I walked in the middle of the road, which was safer than walking close to houses with dark spaces between each one. Why I bothered being so careful when no one even locked their doors at night was out of habit. Mom would say, "You can never be too careful," especially when an awful murder from long ago was still discussed on the tongues of gossipers. Whenever the murder came up, my mother said of the memory hovering ever so slightly, tickling the minds of those who were there. On dark nights like this, thoughts of the boogeyman were never far from my mind. I wasn't too concerned, though, because I could outrun anyone, all without twisting an ankle. Then I saw, or rather felt, his presence. I turned around to see a tall figure coming up behind me. The stranger made little noise as he walked with his head bent, hovering, moving sideways, slightly zigzagging along. If I didn't know any better, I would have thought he was drunk or something. But no, he seemed intent, moving at a fast and steady pace. My heart pounded as I mentally calculated how far it was to the safety of my front door. Lenny, you're just overreacting. But when I got nearer to our lighted street corner, the hair on the back of my neck rose. I could hear his heavy breathing. He was close, too close. When I heard him say brand new penny and felt a tug on the back of my shirt, I ran. Where the speed and the sprint came from, I'll never know. I was so frightened I forgot to scream. I didn't stop at the street light on the corner. I ran straight across to our neighborhood on legs that felt like jelly. My feet hit the nearest front porch and I skidded to a stop. I quickly turned to see a lone figure standing under the streetlight with shadows across his face, dark and foreboding, watching me. Miss Virginia and the Sweet Sisters. Thank you for tuning in and watching my Q&A that I've done for the Boulder Bookstore. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. Please stop in to the Boulder Bookstore and pick up a copy of my book. It is available for purchase. Thank you again, and thanks so much to the Boulder Bookstore.